anybody saying to be in the mic. I was going to make that point.
So you can just skim this and sound it to it.
Okay. Good afternoon, all. Thank you for coming, and certainly I appreciate certainly the majority of our presidential search advisory committee is here with us, and certainly the folks in the search firm from Storbeck. We appreciate the opportunity to hear from the academic community, and we're really interested in students, and we're really interested in hearing from you. We've put out a very broad set of what I would call leadership criteria, and it's available on the website around the presidential search. But we want to narrow that down, and obviously, you know, what we're all trying to do here is the Grand Valley's in a great place today, and it's through the, you know, I think our student success model that we've operated to for a long time, and legitimately concerned about student success and how well we do for students. And what we want to do is here's some of those elements of leadership that you need in order to continue that. And as we move into a relatively continued to be a difficult environment around higher ed, you know, there's obviously declining demographics and issues like that we will all face. And how is it we're going to find a leader, and what are the criteria for that leadership, and to hear from you on what you think we should be looking for, so that we can more narrow those criteria down and make sure that we get a successor to Tom, who can do a great job of continuing to move the university forward. So the way in which we're going to do this is we have the mic in the center of the room there. If anybody wants to say anything, please talk into a mic, because we are live streaming this. And if you don't speak into a mic, we can't hear you. So speak into the mic, and I'm going to turn it over to Julia T. from Storbeck to facilitate the conversation.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. We're delighted to have you here today for this launching of the presidential search process. I'm joined by my colleague, Tom Fitch, and Julie Williams-Krishnan. Will be the leadership of the team in endeavoring to assist the board in the appointment of a worthy successor to President Tom Haas. And we're honored and delighted to have that opportunity. Would it be helpful for the members of, well, will they be able to hear? One of the members of the Presidential Search Advisory Committee to be able to say hello? Would that be possible?
It won't be heard very well, but for the benefit of the folks in the room.
Yeah, why don't we do that?
Okay, terrific. Could we start here? Great.
Hi, I'm Kate Remlinger, Professor English. Sherry Bauman, University Communications.
Mitchell Watt, representing the Grand Valley University Foundation.
Oh, thanks very much.
Mitch Watt, representing the Grand Valley University Foundation.
Dan Hurwitz, I'm the Assistant Vice President for Community Giving from University Development.
I'm Kate Walters. I'm a member of the GVSU board.
Tom Fitch from the search firm, Storbeck Pimentel.
Great. Julie T. from the search firm.
And I never introduced myself. John Kennedy, the chair of the Board of Trustees.
Victor Cardenas, 2000 grad and a member of the Board of Trustees.
Mary Kramer, I'm also an alum and a member of the Board of Trustees.
Jonathan Bowman, I'm the Student Senate President.
Deborah Bambini, I'm professor in nursing and also an alum. Samantha Rhodes, Associate Professor of Engineering.
Kyle Caldwell with the Dorothy A. Johnson Center for Philanthropy.
Diana Lawson, Dean of the Seidman College of Business.
Megan Saul, Board of Trustees and alum.
Sean Lancaster, Professor of Education, and I chair Literacy and Technology.
Ellen Schindel from the Provost Office.
Felix Ngasa, Professor of Chemistry, Chair University Academic Senate, and alumni.
Super. And for those who were not able to join, there is a complete listing of the Presidential Search Advisory Committee listing on the Presidential Search website. You'll see that this is a very broadly based group with all of the constituencies of the campus community and Grand Rapids community represented, and we're really honored to have a chance to work with this group. Let me talk a little bit about our firm before I turn it over to Tom to facilitate the dialogue this afternoon. Storbeck Pimentel and Associates is a retained executive search firm. We work almost exclusively in higher education. We have a strong education focus. There are many search firms that are large and they're involved in many different fields and industries, and a sliver of their work is higher education. Higher education is our bread and butter and our passion. Tom and I are partners within the organization. Julie Williams-Christian is one of our most senior associates. A fine team are joined in spirit today by our search coordinator, Chelsea Franklin, and also Matt Dinolfo, our research assistant. And we will bring the full force of the firm to work in support of the search. We have offices in both Philadelphia and Los Angeles, and a team of 50 throughout the United States. I'm personally based in Richmond, Virginia.
I'm in Atlanta.
Julie is in Boston, for those who couldn't hear. Terrific. And we have a very strong footprint at institutions that look and feel a lot like Grand Valley, with the kind of focus on liberal education combined with outstanding professional programs for which you've come to know. Moreover, a very strong footprint in the region. We've done significant work across the state of Michigan in both the public and private sphere. And lastly, we're a firm known for a track record in diversity. More than 50% of our hires are female, and more than 25% of our placements are coming from underrepresented backgrounds. So that's something that we take very seriously. We know that that's a value that you hold dearly here at Grand Valley, and we'll endeavor to develop a strong, diverse, and deep pool of candidates worthy of this appointment. So we want to start doing a lot less talking and hear from you all. So I'm going to transition it over to my colleague Tom, and I have to apologize in advance. I'm going to need to leave the meeting at 4 o'clock, and I'm sorry for that, but my colleague's going to fully bring me up to speed as to what I missed. So thank you. And Tom?
Thanks, Julie, and thank you all for being here. So, and giving up part of your afternoon for this really important search. Obviously, in the life of a university, and you haven't done it very much here. That's a good thing, but it means, of course, that this is just as crucial as it could be for you. When we go out as a search firm and start to look for prospects and candidates and people who are very happy where they are right now and have no idea they're going to be in Grand Rapids / Allendale at this time next year, it's important for us to be informed about that. And as the people on the Presidential Search Advisory Committee start to review CVs and think about what's going to be important in your next president, it's important for them to hear your comments so that we can help be guided by you, the members of the community. So as we ask you to come forward and make comments now, I would keep a few of these things in mind. These are the things that we're thinking about that we'd like to hear from you. And feel free to obviously add anything you'd like. But in general, we want to hear, what are you proudest of? What makes Grand Valley unique? Why would somebody want to come here to be your next president? Number two, what are the top challenges and opportunities that you think a new president is going to have to deal with right off the bat? Number 3, what does the person look like? What are their attributes? What do you want to see in a new president? And then I would also think about, ask yourself this question as you're thinking of comments to give us. If the person is wildly successful that we hire, in 5 years, in 10 years, what will be different? What will Grand Valley look like in 10 years if we've hired just the perfect fit for you? And I'll stop talking now, please. Don't be shy.
It's often easiest to start with what you love about the place, points of celebration. But if you'd like to start someplace else, the person who just stood, feel free.
In trying to think about what I wanted to say, I started writing.
Should people identify themselves first, just so
Oh,
we know?
yeah, sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Brian Lakey. I'm a faculty member in psychology. I'm also a member of the executive committee of University Academic Senate. So in the course of putting my ideas together, writing was intended as an aid. I ended up writing something. So I'm going to read it to you. I know this is stilted. I apologize for that. But I think it will be clear anyway. I hope. I haven't done this a lot, so I have to figure out how to hold something in front of me. First, I'd like to thank the members of the search committee for agreeing to this difficult and essential task. In thinking about the qualities of a future president of the university, I think it is important to take stock of what we have achieved and where we want to go. In looking at what we have achieved, we were one of the special universities that evokes a strong sense of affection in students, alumni, and faculty. The faculty likes the students, and the students like the faculty. We have excellent facilities and a warm and welcoming vibe. We are the best regional state university in Michigan. But where do we go from here? Do we simply defend our status as the best regional university in Michigan? If so, then we have already had our golden age. Should we try to do better than this? Yes, of course, but how? The obvious options are not available or should be rejected. Of course, we cannot become a small liberal arts college again. We also cannot become a major research university. We do not have the financial or human capital to achieve this. We might be able to become a below-average research university, but why? These universities do not have the financial or human resources needed to achieve real excellence, and instead devote resources away from goals that might be achievable, such as training baccalaureate students especially well. What other type of university is there? We need a president who can articulate a path forward for a university such as ours. Otherwise, we jog in place for the foreseeable future. One obstacle to finding such a president is also one of our greatest strengths, West Michigan nice, which contributes to the warm and welcoming vibe. But the niceness also seems to deter healthy self-criticism, and it is hard to imagine becoming better without healthy self-criticism. Here are some. I don't think we are as strong academically as we like to believe. Here's another way in which our greatest strength might also be our greatest obstacle. Oftentimes the path forward is described as doubling down on the warm and welcoming vibe. But given that we already do this well, how much additional strength can we gain by being even warmer and more welcoming? Presidential candidates need to be able to think critically about the university. My advice, if I were asked, would be to reject candidates who only tell us how wonderful we are. We want a candidate who can suggest a new way forward for a university such as ours. One way forward would be to take advantage of one unique strength we already have, but which I believe we do not fully exploit. We have faculty members who have made important contributions to core knowledge within their disciplines by working closely with baccalaureate students. These faculty-student groupings reflect true collaborations rather than students serving merely as assistants to gain experience. There are quite a few of these student-faculty groupings. I will offer just two examples. For example, Felix Nagasa has made essential contributions to a specialty area within chemistry. Equally important, he does this work with baccalaureate students as true collaborators, and they are authors in the articles that describe this work. Bill Ryan of music, a terrific composer, of likable, modern classical music is another example. He works closely with baccalaureate students, and their performances together have been enthusiastically reviewed by the New York Times music critics, not a small achievement. There are many more student-faculty groupings such as these. These groupings achieve a very high level of academic excellence. One way to move forward would be to direct resources to such high-level faculty-student groupings. High-level faculty-student groupings, such as these, is an area in which we can compete with the University of Michigan and Michigan State. A baccalaureate student at these research universities is not going to get to work directly with a faculty member. The student must compete with postdocs, advanced PhD students, and junior PhD students. The person who actually trains the baccalaureate student is a junior PhD student, perhaps only 1 year removed from a baccalaureate program herself. If the university wanted to build on the strength of such faculty-student groupings, what type of candidates might move us forward? As already mentioned, such a candidate would need to be able to identify our weaknesses as well as our unique strengths. This might require a candidate who has already served as a faculty member at a university that was better than ours. Beyond that, the search committee might favor candidates who have made important contributions to knowledge in their disciplines that involve collaborating with students. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it was well put, well thought out. Thank you. Where's your prepared remarks?
In my head, good afternoon. I'm Henry Matthews. I'm Director of Galleries and Collections at Grand Valley State University. And I don't want to speak to all the needs that this new candidate, whoever he or she may be, should bring, because there's a large committee here and you know best all the components. I'd like to address and be very focused on the art collection, which is what I'm responsible for at Grand Valley. And let me give you a little background. It all started with Don Lubbers, as so much has at Grand Valley. Don had a vision 20 years ago to create a position to bring art to the university, quite literally, physically putting it in the hallways of every building that we built. Now, let me remind you, 20 years ago, we were a very different place. For the last 20 years, we have built major buildings on an annual basis, in some cases more than one, and it was my job to fill them with works of art. Art that reflects diversity, multiculturalism, a wide range of humanity, everything you can think of we tried to put on the walls to expose our students and faculty to the world around them, but the greater world as well. And to that end, I was lucky enough to travel around the globe and bring back art and artists as well. We sent the artists back, but we kept their art. I think that's an important part. And they interacted with students, and we've had some remarkable experiences as a result. What I'm looking for in this new president is support for the visual arts. I think that's a very important part, because we have made the art collection at Grand Valley a unique element of who we are. It has become a recruitment tool. It has, not only is it pretty on the wall, that's sort of that basic first initial response, but it's also meaningful. It's now used in the curriculum. It's used by faculty. It's used by students. Bill Ryan, that you just referred to, has his students actually creating unique musical compositions. We have a competition with that every year, and on it goes. So the arts, the visual arts, have become an integral part of our fabric at Grand Valley. And you may not like every work of art, and I think that's okay. I'm hoping that you can walk a few feet and you'll find something you will like, and that hopefully you can use and respond to and interpret and make part of your life. So that's what I'm looking for in our next leadership.
Thank you.
Right?
Thank you. Very good.
And we have been tremendously impressed by the beautiful pieces of art we've seen throughout campus. Truly.
It makes you unique. It stands out.
Others.
My name is Wael Mukhtar. I'm the Director of School of Engineering. Maybe I'll put 2 points, strength, challenges. So Grand Valley over the last 20 years grew a lot, almost double in size, physically, numbers, and everything. New president, new strategic plan, moving forward, opportunities for growth or different type of growth, numbers or other things. So this is a question that we need new vision moving forward. That last 20 years model may not be the same model moving forward. Second point, challenge also opportunity. Grand Valley is heavily involved, engaged, supporting, and being supported by industry and community. So unlike research university, we work with local community in all type of levels. So projects and courses, students internships, community, nonprofit, and so on. New president should really understand how that structure is not the usual profit-making model. So that's one of the strengths of Grand Valley. My last point, we are not a research university. We are teaching-focused university. That should be very, very clear. Being in Michigan next to big, large research university, we are very strong in this area. I think this is one of the most important part of what we do. And personally, at the school level, School of Engineering, we feel this is really the strength and we should continue to be. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's like an auction. If you move, we'll call on you.
Good afternoon. My name is Ed Garner. I'm the Regional Director for the Small Business Development Center and the current Interim State Director for the Michigan Small Business Development Center here at Grand Valley. I've only been working for the university about 8 months, but I'm a West Michigan native, so I'm familiar with West Michigan, nice, and very familiar with Grand Valley State University. Just two points I just want to make from my observations here in the short tenure, and also I've been working in economic development for about 20 years or so. So from the first point, Grand Valley has been an integral part in really working with companies throughout West Michigan and helping develop the workforce that we're going to need for today and the workforce particularly we're going to need for tomorrow. As everybody knows, there's probably a talent shortage out there. Many of you probably have heard that, and I think that's going to continue to persist. And I think the university can play a big role in helping, trying to not necessarily resolve that issue, but looking for ways, creative ways to keep our companies moving forward. Secondly, in the time I've been here, I just wanted to say I'm very impressed with the focus on inclusion throughout the university. It's not only talked about, but it's stressed in a number of documents and a lot of onboarding tools that we see. It really seems that the college takes this very seriously in making sure this is a place that's welcome to all, that has something for all here, that people feel comfortable here, and sending people, families feel comfortable sending their children here to be educated. And so I like to see that same focus continue, and also the workforce development is key. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, J-Lo, Assistant General Manager, WGVU. The first thing I wanted to say was I think the challenge, would be to find someone who is as warm and personable as President Haas is, and that person who would, I've met him a couple times, had a couple conversations with him, would call me by name, wrote notes to me at home, and that's a special gift. So good luck to all of you to find someone who can fill that position. As far as WGVU, we're a service of Grand Valley State University, and I don't think, and we're working to try and make that bond better, so I'm hoping that this new person has that vision of, they have a television station, public broadcasting station that's being broadcast out that's a service of this university, so I hope that person appreciates that. And also, one of the things that I've also been impressed with is the growth of this university, and this person is going to be challenged with combining that growth with the fluctuations of enrollment and how you go about that. So those are some of the issues that I see, but I look forward to meeting the person that you choose. So thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
It would be great if we could hear from everybody today. You came for a reason. We'd love to hear your voice.
As you know, I'm not shy, so the prompt, though, is welcome. First of all, thank you for this listening session. I think it's really important. We've had such strong leadership in the past at Grand Valley. It's important that we get it right at a very critical time in higher education. I'm Gleaves Whitney. I direct the Hallenstein Center for Presidential Studies here at Grand Valley. And it's been a privilege to be in that position because not only do I get to represent Grand Valley, but I have a window onto the community that I think is really important for this university. We're a window on what the capacities of Grand Valley are in this community. And I think that's really cool. When we bring speakers in, and those speakers blow away both our students, our faculty, staff, and the community, we hit a home run. So I'd like to see a president, obviously, who appreciates that window, that door that we open and keep open between the community out there and here. But Grand Valley has a tremendous legacy in the liberal arts, in a liberal education. And we hear a lot about STEM. And I appreciate the arguments we hear about STEM. STEM is necessary. We do need competently educated and trained people in those crucial areas. But we can't forget the humanities. I support what this university has been committed to in the past. The support for critical thinking skills, the ability to analyze, the ability to listen, to ability to communicate. But the humanities go so much deeper than skills. The humanities, for example, through literature, through history, give us the capacity sympathetically to identify with people who are different from us, if they're taught right, and if the students engage. Only the humanities do that. STEM does not do that. We need to keep a strong humanities component. And I would say, beyond that, the humanities offer us ways to remember what would make us impoverished if we forgot. I speak as a historian when I say that, but also I think I'm speaking for my sisters and brothers in philosophy and in literature and in art history and a number of other areas. We need to keep a strong sense of remembering that which would impoverish us if we forgot. And on that quotation from Robert Frost, I will end. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again, folks, for having this time for us to share with you our hopes and dreams of what is to come. My name is Sean Boltzma, and I'm a faculty member. I'm also Vice Chair of Faculty Senate. And hearing these things from folks around me calms down my strong feelings, because those are the things that I need to hear. And it's something I know about because one of the skills that I have is teaching kindergartners how to calm down strong feelings. And I try to pass that along to my students. And as we come together, there are some things that I've really come to appreciate about President Haas. And those include pivotal leadership at the state level, investing at the state level into his leadership in the 21st Century Commission, the Education Commission, that he brought us through and spent the time chairing. I also appreciate that he's a leader who I can see in Kirkhoff and compete with my students who are quick to want to get a selfie from him. And I've got my own selfie as of last Tuesday. I'm very excited about that. I've tweeted it if you want to go check it out. So the things I think that make us nervous, or at least make me nervous, I'll speak for myself. Watching searches happen across the university recently, I get nervous when there's a sense that it's hard for someone from the outside to know who we are. We try to articulate it. I think we know who we are, but it's difficult to help and translate that to someone from the outside to understand who it is that we are, to attract the best, to attract a leader who's personable, to attract a leader who's credible, who's competent, who can advocate to a legislator. How many trips to Lansing have we heard where you have someone looking back at you, a legislator, maybe not really hearing what you're saying about appropriations and funding? That needs to continue. I've seen enough in higher education to watch a president come in, perhaps not with a teaching background, perhaps with a business background, and bury a local college, my alma mater, right? And it's taken some hits, and to recover from that is really, really tough. So right here in Grand Rapids, those are some challenges. Those are the things where my strong feelings need calming down, right? So I appreciate that we have a search firm who's going to help calm down our strong feelings. I know I'm responsible for them, right? But we need your help, right, to come alongside. And we're going to look to you to know that it's going to be okay, right? It's going to be okay, right? Right? Okay, thank you. Thank you.
We'd love to hear from some of the women in the crowd, too. Sure, if you want to pass the microphone.
Like a Phil Donahue moment.
Stick it in your face, then you have to say something, right?
Yeah, could you?
Sure, fair point.
Sure.
Oh, Sally Jesse.
Thanks, Linda.
Forgot about that.
You know, one.
Oh, come on.
There we go.
No, you can stand right there. You can stand right there.
That's good. Yeah, yeah.
I'm Jen Wardrop with University Development. And from the development perspective, certainly some of the comments have been echoed here already, but that it is very important that the candidate is a strong leader, does understand the significant contributions and relationship that we have with our community, with the businesses, whether it be through co-ops and internships, but then also the community support and how the community has really helped build the university. Understanding the history as far as the prior presidents and how all of them have had that vision and that's been brought throughout. So I think it's just really important that we know who we are, where we've come from, and also certainly being willing to address challenges. Higher ed is going to continue to have some challenges in the future, certainly with enrollment and with what we know is up and coming. So being able to address challenges, but looking at it from a full, big picture, not in any type of a siloed situation. But again, I think being able to be very invested in the community, become a part of the community, is really going to be critical and key.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you also, as others have mentioned, for allowing this opportunity. My name is Melissa Pereno. I work for the Center for Adult and Continuing Studies and have been at the institution, as others have talked about the transitions and other leaders here. I have been here and seen those as well. I would like to encourage us to consider our next leader to be one of those folks who recognize that the student demographics are changing, that there are all types of new learners that bring experience to the table and to the classroom that can be recognized. And I think it's really exciting also to see the changing nature of the classroom and it sort of echoing out into the community as well. So thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Andrew Bixall. I'm the Development Officer for Nursing, Health, and Health Professions. So thank you again for your service and being part of this. I know it takes a lot of time out of your very busy schedule, so thank you for doing this. One word that comes to mind for me when thinking about the next president is culture. So for those of you not familiar with Grand Valley, I know your search firm is learning all about us right now. Culture is a word that I think when people ask me to describe how I think of Grand Valley, I always think of it as sort of a family feel. With 25,000 students, Grand Valley continues to be one of those places where you want to be. It's sort of that magical place where you can have an individual who can relate with students, is relatable with faculty, staff, is relatable with donors. And I think that's really something that is key to making sure that we have the right person where they understand the culture, but we're also willing to challenge the culture and help to grow and shape, because as others have already said, there are changes that will be occurring in higher education, whether it's enrollment or funding or you name it. And so we need someone who can help to sort of get everyone on board and excited and motivated, but also look toward the future. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm new to Grand Valley, actually. I just started this past July, so I'm happy to be here. But I would like to echo what you said about change. I think having a leader, yes, a visionary, but also someone who can manage change, especially at this large scale. So as you're kind of looking through those resumes and CVs and kind of, making sure that we find a person who has had experience maybe doing that. And then also, I would also like to echo that I think especially for our minority students, I think it would be really neat to also see someone maybe who is of just different, I think would be nice, minority or otherwise, or female, or I think that would be really nice. So I really appreciate the fact that your search firm has that experience. So I think that would be really neat to see. So thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Chris. I work in the Career Center. We joke in our office, or at least our supervisor, Troy Farley, we joke about how President Haas says he works for him, and he says that in public often. So I'd like to keep that going. I think the the idea that students are here, not all of course, but many of our students are here to advance themselves in their careers is important, and I'd like to keep that focus at this institution. I hope we're all here for students too. I think we all are, right? So a lot of people have talked about how President Haas does a great job with students, and I'd like to see that from the future president as well. Students are, again, I think why we are here, and I hope that continues. Thanks.
Great.
Sure, why not? I'm Brian Bickford. I'm the Advertising Communications Manager in Institutional Marketing. I'm also an alum and past president of the Alumni Association. So I've seen a few things here, changes over the years, and it's been wonderful, and I'm so proud to be a part of this university and to now be able to advertise it. It's an easy product to advertise. We are West Michigan's university. We have everything that a regional university could ask for, I think. It's wonderful to hear so many people from so many different areas expressing and being so proud of what they do for the university. I think that's critical. And going forward, I think the next president, I think community is what I've picked up on is most important. This person needs to have a connection with the community and be able to be a part of it and lead the community as well as the university. I think what this person does in Lansing is critical as well. Accountability and transparency. That's what President Haas has brought to that role, I think, and has really excelled, and I hope the next person will do that as well. I see an opportunity of growth in our graduate programs, and if the new president can work towards making us giving us a better graduate program presence, that would be great. I think right now people realize we have graduate programs, but maybe don't look to us for graduate programs. I think that's an area of opportunity and growth as the traditional student count goes down. So that's an opportunity, and I just appreciate your work on finding the right person. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, Dan Vayner, Associate Registrar. I'm a second-generation Laker, and if we want to have a third-generation Laker, we really got to keep that tuition in check. So spending is really important here, and I know that academics are more important, don't get me wrong, but the tuition is an issue nationwide, and Grand Valley really needs to keep that in check. We do a great job right now, but let's really do the best we can with that.
Good afternoon. My name is Karen Riedinger. I work here at Seidman College of Business in the Dean's office. The short answer would be whoever Dean Lawson says we should hire, because I know she's got a great beat on what I think Grand Valley needs. We've been talking about this a lot in our leadership team over the last several weeks. This is a really important point of transition for Grand Valley. I've only been here 18 months, but I've been working in higher ed for 15 years now, and I see a lot of change ahead, not just for Grand Valley, but for the industry as a whole. So while I hope we choose our next leader, somebody who is well-grounded and experienced in higher education, the tradition of higher ed, I hope they bring and that speaks to the what we should do. I hope we can also find somebody who, when thinking about how we move forward, they can bring in the best, most compelling ideas from across all industries and not just higher ed. So I'm hoping it's not a myopic higher ed thinking person, but somebody who's looking across all industries. As for their attributes, I'm looking for somebody who is authentic, insightful, and courageous, because I do think courage is going to be necessary. Some of the challenges with managing growth and allocating resources, perhaps in a different way, is going to take a lot of courage to put a new model out there and make some cool things happen. So it's an exciting time. We've got a great base to build on, and I guess the last thing I would say is in 5 years, I wouldn't be disappointed if we are finding ourselves looking for another president by then, because this next president might be a transition for us. They might have to do a lot of hard work, and that kind of person may not be the kind of person who stays for 30 years, and that shouldn't be a failure if it comes to that. So I would just put that out there as a thought. Thank you.
All right, I brought my list. My name is Rachel Siglo, and I am President Haas's assistant. And I was also President Murray's assistant. And before that, I worked for Governor Engler for 6 years. So I feel like I have a good picture of what a good leader is. So I wrote down that the next president should be student-focused as their number one. Do you have an interest in attending varsity sporting events, intramural sports, club sports, plays, operas, poetry readings, musical recitals, President's Ball, Veterans Gala, the Cancer Walk, international student events, students of color events, the LGBT student events? In essence, a willingness to attend anything a student or group of students invites the president to attend. I also believe that the next president should have a willingness to meet with students when they ask to meet with him or her, and perhaps mentor students. Currently, President Haas mentors veteran students. He will meet with any student who's a veteran who was asking to meet with him. I believe the next president should have the ability to communicate, good writing skills, excellent public speaking skills. In case you don't know this, the president is asked a minimum of 7 times per week to speak to different groups. The remarks are mostly welcoming groups to campus, but they also include introducing other speakers, giving testimony before the legislature, and recording many, many videos. I think the third important attribute should be that this person is comfortable in his or her own skin. The president is asked to meet with many different people: foreign heads of state, the governor, legislators, board members, donors, professors, lawyers, accountants, alumni, students, local community members, mayors, locally elected officials, parents of students, international guests, as well as the presidents of the other 15 public universities. They have to be comfortable being who they are. They have to be comfortable traveling to spread the GVSU story, a willingness to travel abroad to meet and better understand our international partners, a willingness to travel to Washington, D.C. and Lansing to meet with federal and state leaders, the willingness to travel to meet with alumni, donors, and parents of students, the willingness to conduct business during breakfast, lunch, and dinner meetings, and the willingness to host dinners at their home, open up their home. A willingness to serve on West Michigan community boards. And I think other people have mentioned this, but I will just say this as well: the general knowledge to be familiar with convocation and commencement ceremonies and history of higher education, familiar with the NCAA Division II governance structure, familiar with the GVSU strategic plan, our tuition, our financial aid, housing, and meal plans, and a familiarity with the Higher Learning Commission accreditation process. Thank you.
In other words, no life of their own. You know that.
I'm Ricky Benavides. I am the Executive Assistant for Community Relations in the Office of the President. Unlike Rachel, I don't have a list, so I'll just share a few things off the top of my head. This has been mentioned a few times with the changing field of higher education and those typically traditional students they're not graduating from high school as fast as they used to. So a president that is focused on those other students, veteran students, non-traditional students, students of diversity, and that's not just recruiting, but that's also retaining. We see a really large gap in our students from underrepresented communities who do not return to the university. So, and I know that President Haas and the other cabinet members and faculty and staff focus a lot on that, and to see that continue and maybe even be bolstered a little bit would be fantastic and serve a lot of our different needs that we have at the university. One thing that Rachel didn't mention is that the president writes a lot of notes. He writes, part of my job used to be to send these notes on behalf of the president after he's written them, and he writes, I don't know, Rachel, probably 15 a week, sometimes less, sometimes many more. And those are to community leaders, to alumni, to faculty. And he writes them for a variety of different reasons: a childbirth, a death of the family, a sabbatical report. Recently, an alum lost his daughter, and President Haas heard of that and wrote a note, and just that caring that he has for our community. I think that goes, everyone's mentioned caring, but just the level of care that President Haas has, I don't know if it can be matched, but I sure hope that we fight to match it. And better penmanship wouldn't be wouldn't be an issue either, because sometimes sending those, you don't know who they're going to. Thank you.
Good to know.
Just a short comment. President needs the ability and the strength to come in and let Rachel tell him how to do his job for a while, because she's done a terrific job. But in seriousness, they need the ability to let lots of people tell them how to do their job and what to listen to. We've got a terrific community and a lot of experts who work here in the faculty and other places, and that ability to listen internally, besides the community, besides the legislatures, besides you trustees, will help him succeed or her succeed as our next president.
Good job, Linda.
Yes, thank you.
Way to pull them out. All right. You know what? I would like, and we still have some time. Well, we have plenty of time for the other comments to make, but I thought it might be interesting to pass the mic around and have you all just give me a one or two word answer to the following, kind of fill in the blank. In 5 years, if the next president is wildly successful, Grand Valley will be what?
Maybe I should sit in the back. So, back to my comment about growth. In 5 years, the internal structure will match the size of Grand Valley, and the engagement in the community, the quality at the classroom will maintain and become better.
Thank you. That's more than one word, but I'll take it.
I continue to be a special place not only for the people who work here, but for the students.
I hope that Grand Valley continues to be flexible and that we have made some changes that recognize that the delivery of higher education is changing, while we also keep the climate that everybody loves.
In Division 2, the leader and the best.
The institution that high school students want to be at, want as the #1 choice, and also with a thriving donor base.
I would say I hope we continue to have that feeling of a very relatable place, a large institution where we don't lose touch with one another, and the ease of which that from the students to faculty to staff, that we can all work cooperatively together.
I'm going to say welcoming to students, so that both students and parents want their kids to attend here, and also strategic from a forecasting standpoint.
I would say entrepreneurial, both in terms of outward to the institution, but also inward, and looking creatively at continuing to challenge people and encourage them to be their best.
A leader with continuous industry support.
I hope that we remain student-focused.
We are able to demonstrate the return on investment in higher education.
I would hope that the focus on inclusion only strengthens and is embedded more than it is now.
A place where collaboration is what is our success, and without it, we would fail.
Student-focused, responsive, and appreciated.
To be known nationally as the best comprehensive university in the country.
Affordable.
Remain student focused.
The top choice of students across the state and throughout the Midwest.
Recognized as being innovative.
Offers a contemporary and highly relevant take on liberal education.
An excellent reputation, and not just student focused, but also community focused.
Michelle already mentioned this, but an increased and bolstered focus on inclusion and diversity.
A lot of my answers have been taken. I would say that we have followed our strategic plan and that we are still affordable and the destination where seniors in high school still want to come.
I would hope that in 5 years we would have the most innovative, dynamic, cutting-edge art museum that will reflect the diversity and multiculturalism of our campus.
That was your one word? Excellence.
We'll have sent more students than the previous 5 years to medical school and first-tier law schools.
Continuing to find ways to graduate some of our underrepresented students, following through on our commitment in offering them admission to our place, and continuing to increase the diversity of both students and faculty.
Linda?
You've heard way too much from me already. I like the inclusiveness, and I do like the culture at Grand Valley. So I would like to see that continue.
Thank you. Good stuff. Most of you failed the one-word test, but it was all really good comments. What about members of the group? Anyone here that would like to offer questions or?
Yeah, I think for some of the trustees, one of the things that came up that I heard today was wanting to be known for excellent programs. And somebody said earlier today in another session that the community here embraces Grand Valley. The West Michigan, and especially in the Grand Rapids area, has embraced Grand Valley philanthropically, community-wise. They're very proud of the institution, but they don't really know what are the best programs. And someone just mentioned wanting to send more students, more graduates to the best medical schools or the best law schools. What do you think what are our strong suits? What is in our hand? What's our strong suit here? What are some of the programs that you think we should be most proud of? That wasn't a trick question. And you can be very self-serving in the programs that you want to talk about. But I mean, really, truly, what somebody should be able to say, these are the 3 best programs that we have.
Where's the history comment, Matt?
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll put my comments on the record. It's something that we've kind of overlooked, and I think it's indicative of everything that's been mentioned here. And it's been mentioned, but it's been who's been mentioning it. It's to ensure that we have the best staff that makes this culture what it is for the university, and that goes from the top down to the bottom. That's all the vice presidents, the deans, assistant vice presidents, department directors, and the staff. From a product of this university that has been given so much by these individuals, I want to make sure that the next person we have in this office, in this presidency, ensures that we have the best staff to make sure we have the best professors and the best students have an offer when they leave this place. I'll do my best to Phil Donahue.
In 5 years, Grand Valley will be a much more inclusive university that serves the educational needs of a wide variety of student groups, traditional, non-traditional, veterans, and others, and at the same time will help West Michigan and the rest of Michigan with their huge talent crunch that they have over the next decade. Because without finding the right employees for the right positions, our businesses will not grow or sustain the current status. And we do that through education and a variety of educational delivery modes, adapting the way we deliver curriculum to meet the needs of the students that are changing, and also growing graduate programs that think beyond the traditional graduate programs.
Yeah, sorry. So I'll speak from engineering's perspective. In 5 years, I'd like to see 50% women in engineering. Right now, we're at a paltry 10 or 15, so it's going to be challenging.
How about 50% of men in nursing?
Good one.
But I would like to see a nursing force, see us educating and preparing nurses to be the premier healthcare providers for the really changing environment that we are entering into practice now.
I'd like to see two things. One is that our institutional reputation is not such a big secret. And I think I've heard that said but from other people as well. And I'd also like to see the institution tap adult learning, because learning is lifelong. And I got a master's when I was in my mid-50s. And I think that whether you have a credentialed program like that leads to a degree like a master's or some other kind of credential, I think that's a wonderful role for an institution like Grand Valley to play.
I guess I would like to see us to continue to be good stewards of our resources. I think that's one of the things we do well. I think that's hard for people to imagine with how much we've grown. It's hard for me to imagine that we're able to do what we do with what we do. So I hope we continue that. And then I have a question for the group after this.
I'd like us to remember and honor the history that the university was founded by the business community to grow and provide a wonderful resource to educate and I think stop the flight of students from West Michigan leaving the area and not to return. And I think to honor that and grow business and support businesses and respect that. And as President Haas would say, is we're in the talent development business, and to maintain our position being the premier resource for that.
Well, first of all, thanks to all of you for coming in and sharing your thoughts and ideas. I think we as a committee, have a really tough challenge to sort through, who's going to be the next leader and who can replace the excellent leadership that's been provided by Tom and all of his predecessors. For me, the importance is continuing the legacy of the university and the growth that we've seen while maintaining the highest level of quality education for our students at an affordable price. And the university has done such an excellent job over the years in doing that. But as the world changes and higher education changes, that's going to become a very, very critical component for us in our success.
Grand Valley has a very special community, and we are the community, and that's very important to me. I've been here for a long time, and I'm just so proud to be part of this community, and I want to see that continue.
I'd like to see something that was already said, that Grand Valley be the best comprehensive university in the country, but also be nationally, internationally recognized, and to have our students recognized as critical thinkers. One of the programs that wasn't mentioned, I think, is education. We have many students who come here to be teachers, whether it's in foreign languages or English or math or sciences, and that's something that we have a strength in maintaining and even developing further.
I'd like us to maintain our student focus, to be focused on our students. I think that's key, and to maintain the liberal education focus that we have. I think that's what makes GVSU unique, and that's partly an answer to that question, who we are and what we do best.
Matt, are you going to express an opinion?
Visionary.
I've got a question. So a couple of you mentioned challenges, but not necessarily specifics. And I think we all sort of broadly say that there are challenges to higher education. I'm wondering if you have a sense as to whether there's any challenge that's sort of unique to Grand Valley, and what that might be. You guys are in the business, the rest of us aren't, and I think we can lose some of that focus because we're not there. So I'd be interested if there are things that you can think of, those in the audience or the rest of my committee members are part of this university on a regular basis, whether there are unique challenges to Grand Valley.
A couple of weeks ago, I had a conversation with colleagues at the University of Michigan. We were talking about how Grand Valley places art throughout its buildings, but they can't seem to do that. And they said that their comment was, it's because we're so young, we can do things that others can't. And I think that's an interesting challenge, perhaps in reverse. Because we are so young, we can do things perhaps that others won't. And I do think that's something to think about and puts us in a unique position.
You know, one of the things that I was made aware of when I came to Grand Valley 15 years ago is that you have to deal with the fact that we are a split campus. And I think, Kate, to your question, the challenge at the Hauenstein Center, and I know many other parts of the university, has been how do you integrate and create that sense of community over a 12.5-mile stretch. Sometimes Allendale feels like a different world to what's going on down here. We struggle mightily to bring students into our programs downtown. That's why we have about a quarter of our programs in Allendale to try to include students there, but there's not the continuity.
So I can speak for engineering. Accreditation bodies start to change requirement for accreditation. So the challenge I see we have is the traditional degrees that 20 years ago we used to graduate degrees. Jobs are redefined in industry. Skills are totally different. How undergrad-focused university can still provide skill training for the new development that maybe research university are teaching at grad level. So how undergrad students would be skilled to meet this market requirement. That needs strategic move from the president, not to make fast move or slow move, so that we can maintain our strength, at the same time keep up with this everyday evolving changes.
I think a challenge for us is we've been a site-based institution educationally, and it's been wonderful for particularly our undergraduate students. The experience they get inside the classroom as well as outside the classroom is really quite phenomenal. I think a challenge for us and for all of higher ed institutions is the only way to learn is by a 4-year or master's degree. I think that in the future we're going to have to look at components of learning in addition to the traditional 4-year and graduate degrees. And I think that that's something that's going to be upon us, and how do we address that, especially with the challenges of student learning.
One of the challenges that I see is in terms of we've been fortunate to have leaders who've been here for many years, and I think some of them are getting ready to retire or having retirements. So having a president who is able to come in and be able to learn really quickly what's going on, because that historical knowledge may not always be around to help give guidance or perspective in what's going on. So it's a challenge, but also an opportunity.
Not you, Matt.
Thank you. One of the unique challenges about Grand Valley is we're in this tension of a community, and we've heard referred to Michigan Nice. I like to live here. But we've got some information that it's not good for everybody. It's good for me, it fits for me. And so when we bring students in, when we bring faculty and staff in from other places who may not look like me and have the SMA at the end of my name, that West Michigan Nice for them disappears, right? And that's a unique challenge because folks aren't necessarily picking up on that. But I think some of what, and it was alluded to in the back, with Grand Valley being a leader to this community, when benefits were offered to beyond just same-sex couples, right, that they're traditionally offered, that's leadership to a community, right? And we didn't get, you would know better than I what kind of pushback we got from that, but we were leaders regardless of that pushback. And that's the kind of place when we can, in our space, provide leadership for our community in this area that will help us all and not be content till we all, the reports are in that all of us find this place. I think U.S. News and World Report just came out with a list, and number 12, I think this region was. But again, there's a subtext, but not for all people, right? And that's a unique factor. Thanks.
I think one of our biggest challenges is funding. We've been very successful over the years, and we have proven to the state that we can do more with less, and unfortunately that's hurting us. What I'd like to see as a biggest challenge would be is how do we get parity with all the other state schools and the amount of funding that we get per student. If we did that, I think a lot of our issues would disappear.
I would, in listening to what said, one of the things that I think is a challenge is I think we still are relatively a secret. And so if you were looking for something that you'd want to see changed is hopefully because we continue with our student success model and we innovate in ways of providing this very strong liberal arts academic background to our students, and continue with that model of student success, that we get noted for doing that in a different way than other higher ed institutions, which I think are going to continue to struggle with a change in demographics, which is really certainly a Michigan or Midwest problem anyways, in declining demographics for the next couple of years. So I think we have to really look at, how is it that we're going to innovate to try to provide this educational model at a lower cost. And we're recognizing that you can't do that without great faculty, which require pay and significant pay. So, we have to look at other delivery models, I think, for some of our education.
Yep. All right, well, on that note, yes. Anything else for the good of the order? I think you've all, I really appreciate the comments. I'll speak on behalf of all the nodding heads here that this has been a valuable experience for all of us.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you for giving us your time.
Yep.
One other thing I will say, so you will start to see this position advertised in May. That's when we'll really be launching. We'll be reaching out to prospects. We are more than happy to have your nominations. As you know of people nationally that you think we should contact and invite a confidential conversation with, we're glad to have those names. In all of the advertising, in the position profile, everything that's out there, there'll be an email address. And I will tell you what it is right now, in fact. Do you have that in front of you? Tough to remember. GVSU president at our storebackpimentel.com. But you'll see this in everything. Send your nominations to that, and we'll contact those people. Thank you. Okay. Anything?
Thank you.
John? Nope.
No, thank you very much for your attendance, and you're giving us some good ideas and views. Thank you.
Good stuff. You know Rachel? No. Rachel. I work with Rachel a lot.
What in doubt, answer.
I know, yes, this is important. I need to know how many to be. So make it happen.
Going home, Mike.
That's what we do. Rachel. Yeah.
But I traditionally come in
Impressive, but yeah, but you work at England.
but I think